So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the second morning or afternoon for some or evening for others of the autumn intensives of PISLAP. For those who weren't here yesterday and are joining us for the first time, we wanted to give you a short overview of PISLAP before welcoming and introducing the team from the Georgia Justice Project. So PISLAP stands for the Project for Integrating Spirituality, Law, and Politics, and our website is spiritlawpolitics.org. We're a group of lawyers, students, law teachers, activists from all walks of life who seek to work together to support the creation of a new legal culture. And we have a 25-year history of gathering, writing together, and sharing and supporting each other's work. Our aspiration is to help move forward the emergence of a legal culture that goes beyond the existing system, which does too little to foster compassion, mutual understanding, and healing of conflict and repair of relationships. We fully support the many legal struggles to safeguard human rights in the legal system, and many of us are actively involved in those, but we also see ourselves as seeding the groundwork along with many others for creation of a new legal culture. Yesterday, we heard from Fania Davis and Bijan Barnes on restorative justice. They constituted our group yesterday as a restorative community and laid out both the potential and the challenges faced in bringing restorative practices to communities and to the legal culture. We turn today to the work of the wonderful Georgia Justice Project, which embraces, as PISLAP does, Martin Luther King Jr.'s dictum, "Justice is love, correcting that which revolts against love." PISLAP has a long and deep relationship with GJP. GJP has played a seminal role in PISLAP in helping us to envision the qualities that a law practice, in this case a criminal defense practice, can bring to their community, embracing and supporting the community while providing a vigorous criminal defense, but also seeding and supporting the implementation of many important changes in the Georgia legal system to address racial injustice and the over-incarceration of Black and Brown people. Today, our workshop will be led by PISLAP's dear friends, Doug AMMAR, Executive Director, and Ross BROCKWAY, Staff Attorney, along with our new colleagues, DJ Sims and Erica Curtis will also be assisting. So welcome, everyone. And I'm just going to take a few moments to introduce folks from the Georgia Justice Project. But let me just check if there's anything in the chat first. Okay. So Peter, did you want to say something?
Just one comment to encourage people to make their faces visible on their videos so we can see all of you and get a feeling for all of us together.
Thank you, Peter.
Not a requirement.
Yes. Doug, I'm sorry, just get okay. So Doug AMMAR has been an active presence at GJP since its beginning in 1986. Doug started as a volunteer, then joined as a staff attorney in 1990, and he has led GJP as executive director since 1995. GJP, as I mentioned, not only provides holistic criminal defense and social services, but also seeks systemic change in Georgia law that will reduce the number of people under correctional control and reduce barriers to reentry. During Doug's time as executive director, GJP has helped to change 21 laws in Georgia that have worked to reduce barriers to reentry for people impacted by the criminal justice system. It has also continued to grow and expand its capacity to serve its clients over that time. Doug is originally from Charleston, West Virginia. I will put all the GJP detailed bios in the chat. Doug has many accomplishments, but I'm not going to list them all right now. DJ Sims, so welcome to GJ, who we're meeting for the first time. DJ Sims is an organizer, minister, and activist born in St. Louis, Missouri. Growing up in such a racially divisive city had a large impact on the way DJ saw social justice, even from a young age. He soon made the decision to attend the Fisk University in Nashville, where he double majored in political science and history. On graduation, DJ became a community teacher for Teach for America in Nashville and St. Louis. It was during the Ferguson uprising that DJ decided to focus on community organizing and abolition. Soon after, he enrolled at Candler School of Theology at Emory University, where he received his Master of Divinity with a certificate in Black Church Studies, along with concentrations in race and religion, leadership in church and community, and criminal justice ministries. DJ also serves as an Odyssey Impact Fellow, where he works to help faith communities facilitate conversations around anti-recidivism and religion. DJ has devoted his work and research to social justice through a theological lens. His work and writing have been featured in Sojourners, the Center for the Study of Law and Religion, Fordham, and Facing South. DJ serves as the criminal record intake specialist and community engagement liaison at GJP, and assists folks in learning about how to clear their criminal records, as well as mobilizing statewide groups and organizations on reentry reform efforts. And now I'd like to introduce Ross Brockway. Ross is a staff attorney at GJP, where he works primarily as a criminal defense attorney, representing poor people who have been charged with crimes and want to address both the criminal charges and the deeper challenges in their lives. Ross came to GJP under an Equal Justice Works Fellowship, seeking to reform Georgia's child support system and assist the tens of thousands of low-income parents who face child support debt punishment because they lack the ability to pay off court-ordered debts. Ross continues to work with people dealing with debt and other reentry issues, and continues to advocate for policy change to end Georgia's widespread criminalization of poverty and system-created cycles of imprisonment, impoverishment, and forced separation of families. Prior to GJP, Ross worked as a criminal defense student attorney, a racial justice researcher and advocate, an anti-displacement and housing activist, and a teacher in high poverty public schools. Ross has a law degree from Harvard Law School, a master's in education from Arizona State University, and a bachelor's from Middlebury College. So welcome to our colleagues from GJP, and I will put their full bio again in the chat. And over to you all at GJP.
Thanks all. I'm really excited to see everybody, and if your faces aren't shown, to hear your voices later at some point, I hope. Our presentation will involve some audience participation and questions at the end. We'll sort of have a panel with Doug and DJ where you can ask questions and also give comments, where we'll ask questions of the audience. So there will be a time where we really want everybody to participate at the end. If you have questions before then, just write them down and try and save them for the end to ask them later. Or if you feel like it's really urgent or you want to get something in real quick, you can put it in the chat or the Q&A. I think there may be a Q&A. Maybe there's not a Q&A. I don't know. The chat. So that would be for timely questions. But if it's not like time sensitive, just save it and ask it later, because we really do want you to ask questions when we get to the Q&A. Before that, though, we will want to talk about GJP. We want to talk about GJP's model and how we think it represents a different way, and in some sense a deeper way of doing legal practice than is most common in other legal nonprofits and law firms. But before even that, I want to ask a big picture question for you all to think about as you as this presentation goes along, as this conversation continues. I'll begin by just saying some words that we don't often hear in legal practice, and that we don't often use in legal culture, that we don't often associate with the law. Spiritual, spirit, relationships, community, peace, suffering, change, creation, forgiveness, love. Think about those words. How often have you heard them used in court? How often have you heard them used in legal practice or in policy discussions, in politics even? And why is it that we don't say those words or hear those words? Why is it that we don't include them in our legal lexicon? What would happen if we not only released these words from their sort of pariah status, if we not only used these words, but actually made them the center and driving force of legal practice? That is in essence, I believe, what GJP has tried to do, to make human connection and community building, to make spiritual enrichment not an afterthought or a side issue, but the reason, the method, and the goal of legal practice. And it's a holistic practice. It involves direct services, it involves policy work. We'll talk a little bit more now about what GJP actually does, practically speaking. But think about those words as this presentation goes on and as we have our conversation. Why aren't these concepts part of legal culture? And what will happen? What does happen? What's the impact of making that the focus and driving force of a practice? So I'm going to turn it over to Doug now, who'll give an introduction to who GJP is and what we actually do day to day.
Russ, thank you. Great job, as always. Never surprised, always delighted. So here's what we're going to do. I think in terms of a format, I'm not going to try to go to the format. This is the only PowerPoint we're going to have, just to give you some basic building blocks of what we do here, and sort of the components. So that's in the backdrop and your lens, if you will, about who we are. And then we're going to dive more deeply into the work and how it connects to the PISLAP principles, as Ross already started. So I thought I would just start with saying some basic facts, like who we are. We've been around for 35 years. Nanette has already mentioned that. I always like to mention, I know it's significant to a lot of people, that we're directly behind Dr. King's grave. All of us here on the team are sitting in our office today. We have and right behind my wall, about 50 feet away, is Dr. King's grave and the historic Ebenezer Church and the King Center, which is run by the family. I always tell people, I've been working on this block for 30 some years, and I always say it's sacred ground and it's powerful just to be where we are. Just to orient you, we're small is a relative term. We've grown some, as Nanette alluded to. We're about 31 people on our staff. If you were part-time, about a budget this year about 3.5 million, which is more than we've ever had, actually. And we really talk about, you'll hear this a few times, our three components of work, sort of legal services and social services together, policy work, as well as community engagement and education. I want to just orient folks to many folks who know about criminal defense or criminal justice. Some folks are not even here, as we know, from America, but this is sort of a quick, I use this graph a couple of times to talk about the criminal justice system in America. And just to orient you first to the structure, but then to talk about our work in the midst of that structure. So in this arc of justice, I often call it, is sort of the front part, or the red and orange part, is the front end. Folks in criminal justice call it. Yellow is the middle, and blue is the back end. And in the front end is anywhere from policing, obviously, to someone being arrested, someone being prosecuted, and whatever happens in court. And the case is over, someone's sentenced, then often starts the middle, or often incarceration or punishment. And on the back end is anywhere from folks who are released from prison or who are on probation as part of their sentence, as well as the whole reentry process, which includes kind of in perpetuity, because of criminal records in this country, how it impacts somebody's life. So on the top of this arc are some numbers to orient you to Georgia's numbers. We have other graphs we could use later to talk about America in general, but I just want you to understand Georgia. Then in Georgia, those first two buckets, the 39,000 and 54,000, are folks who are incarcerated. And that means jail or prison. So about 90,000 people roughly who are actually in prison in Georgia. And that number has been pretty consistent for the last 2 years. But if you add to that the folks who are under correctional control, including probation or parole, that number swells to 527,000. And unfortunately, Georgia is the nation's leader for those who are under correctional control, meaning jail, prison, probation, or parole. 1 in 18 Georgians are under correctional control. We've led the country for quite a while, and by a great extent. Nobody's even very close to Georgia on this front. So that's a staggering statistic. And then one other data point we like to point out is that of our roughly 11 million people, I think 10.7, the recent census has Georgia's population pegged at, 4.3 million of our 10.7 have a criminal record. And that means that someone has been arrested and or convicted, that there's an official record of their arrest or conviction. So roughly 40% of the Georgia population has a criminal record. And this compares to roughly 25 to as high as 30. The numbers vary a little bit nationally, but as low as 25% of Americans have been arrested and or convicted. This number keeps growing. It's not getting smaller. And this is another scary statistic. So you say, well, what is Georgia's Justice Project sort of intervention in that system? And the way I like to talk about it, we sort of intervene at sort of every level. The holistic defense work that has already been mentioned a little bit is we start in the very front in that orange and red part. And but what makes us different, of course, is we follow our folks all the way through the yellow part and into the blue part. So staying with people long after the case is over. About 3 years ago, we launched another effort that is just representing people in prison, and that's the yellow part on the top. We have been working with a new prison called the Metro Reentry Facility. In fact, Ross was there yesterday, I believe. And that's a new effort for us. We can talk about that if you like, but again, trying to remove barriers to reentry before people get out of prison. And then of course, we do a lot of work on the back end, and those who are represented on either the first two boxes, we offer support from a reentry perspective, primarily from our social workers, but also our lawyers do work on criminal records work and other barriers to reentry that is housed in the blue bucket. And then there's, and this slide's a little bit dated. We actually, Nanette said it, we've changed 21 laws. In the green, we've actually been worked on the policy front and have changed about 21 laws in Georgia. A good bit of those related to reentry. So this is just a quick overview of our work and how it matches up with the system at large. Next couple of slides, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just giving you some data points about who we are. This again is a year ago fiscal year, but it gives you a sense of some of our numbers of the number of people we see and have contact with through social services and legal services. Our work on policy, some financial pieces we can talk about if you like. But then I think I really want to give you a broader view of the work than just the micro pieces. And this is the next two slides are really talking about how we understand our theory of change. And our work really consistently consists of these three pieces: direct service, sort of policy engagement, and community outreach, if you will. And those three all start with direct service. In other words, we don't just show up at the State House and say we want to change a law because we think it's the right thing. The ideas for what needs to be changed comes from our working with folks, both as lawyers and from the social service side, being engaged with people long term, and seeing the barriers that folks have. Not just informs, it really kind of dictates what we do on the policy front. And then there's another component we've learned, I guess I would say I learned sort of the hard way. I thought once you got a law change, it just kind of stopped. But the law is only as good, or a change in the law is only as good as people know about it and that people are using it. So we do a lot of work around community engagement. DJ does a good bit of that. We all do some of that, but making sure that folks know about the law, that we also keep our ears open to what other issues are, but we learn about what the issues are from that first bucket, number one. And we do a ton of outreach in community, a lot of it around criminal records, but a lot of it just probation. And we can talk more about all the different things we're working on. The next slide is a sort of a little bit of a reiteration of that, but a little more visual graphic. And again, Annette did a good job of capturing our main two goals about reducing the number of people in correctional control. One reason I wanted you to understand what correctional control was, again, jail, prison, probation, and parole, with Georgia again leading the country. and of course, removing barriers to reentry, and doing that through our sort of 3 buckets, if you will. Our holistic defense work, there's a lot of ways of talking about it. I talk about it in lots of different ways. And one of the ways of talking about it is everything we do, by the way, starts with representing somebody, being somebody's lawyer. And that's true for the holistic defense. But really what makes it different is, and I often talk about this in sort of 3 dimensions, is the social service dimension, which is that second bucket, assigning social workers on our team. We have about 4 social workers on our staff to work with our clients, assess clients before we even take them, support them through the process, and offer support long after the case is over. Of course, the whole team does that. But the last point there is the other dimension, the time dimension, is that it's really sort of never over for us with our clients. And you'll hear this in a couple of the videos we'll play. So we're bringing the voices of our clients to this gathering mainly through the videos, and we have a number of them you'll hear that really reflect that piece. And then just give you sort of a sampling of some of the things we're working on. One idea here is that we do a lot of work around expungement, which is sort of the technical term for taking something off your record. And we do a ton of presentations. We actually have, back before COVID, today we would have our first Friday when it would be 30 or 40 people out in our big gathering room, but we still do that electronically. We do work with a number of expungement summits. On the right, the visual here is from a summit we worked on in the summer. We've actually done 2 or 3 since June, I think. And one of the more interesting things we've done of late is we've opened up the first expungement desk inside a courthouse. And we've done it in a courthouse, which is right north of where I'm sitting, Cobb County, which is adjacent to Fulton County, the first expungement desk in the state. And we are planning and have some funding to open up probably 4, maybe as many as 5 other expungement desks around the state, so that people can walk into court and get that service is delivered right where it should be. But also, again, I get all excited about expungement desks, but that's just one example. But one of the cool things about it is that we are in partnership with the prosecutors and the judges and the clerks to move those processes even faster and more smoothly than any other mechanism that's available right now. And of course, we have a ton of volunteer lawyers who help us. We usually have 150 to as many as 300 lawyers a year who take on a case, primarily either help us on intake or help us on criminal records work, or even our work out at Metro Reentry Facility. So these are just a couple quick components. I could talk about our policy work. I will say that we try to keep it to 1 or 2 or 3, depending on our bandwidth. We had 2 big victories in the last 18 months, but the real push, the hardest, we're focused on driver's license this year because it's an issue we've run into. Driver's license suspension is I believe the #1 conviction in the country. And in Georgia, it's very, we've just run into many barriers there, but we're trying to push the law on that. It's going to be an uphill battle, but we'll continue to push. We did have this great success on probation this calendar year, which is hopefully going to reduce that number in the green. Child support is always an issue that Ross came to bring to us. That's going to be it's going to be a long haul. We found out a lot of barriers there legislatively, but we're also going to be pushing some issues around occupational licensing for folks with a criminal record. So this gives you a sampling of some of the things we're working on from a policy standpoint. All right, and with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Ross. Is that right? Or we're going to show the video, I think?
Yeah.
Ross, take it away.
Yeah, I think that it's let's show this video, which will go over some of what Doug talked about, and also, I believe, has a couple messages from clients. It's going to be the first of a few videos that we show throughout this. Most of them are pretty short, but we wanted to bring in our clients' voices to this presentation, and this turned out to be the most practical way of doing that. So here's the first video, which is about GJP. Sorry, 1 second. Technical difficulties, maybe. Okay, here we go.
Life is full of ups and downs. We all make mistakes. But imagine you made a mistake that follows you for the rest of your life, that stops you from achieving reasonable life goals. Unfortunately, for too many Georgians, that is a reality for people who have a criminal record. In 1986, the Georgia Justice Project decided to address that cycle. And we do that in 3 different ways: through our holistic defense work, our reentry lawyering work, as well as our policy and community outreach work. And so today, we really talk about our work as a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary sort of work, where lawyers and social workers work together. The idea is not just to solve their legal case, but really use the leverage of the fact that we are a free lawyer to then help that client address the underlying issues that are not allowing them to accomplish their own goals in life.
So if you look across the U.S., Georgia is the highest state with individuals that's under correctional control. So the various issues that our clients deal with, such as mental health, substance abuse issues, and even poverty, we have seen changes in their ability to make different decisions. They're able to possibly go out and get employment, and even just down to simple feeling like, okay, I'm empowered, I have a voice, and I am someone, is very important and vital to those that we work with. It's something that we see a lot of. One of our clients, Willie, spent many years in the prison system. With our support, we were able to keep him connected to his loved ones.
GJP represented me. You know, they were fighting for my life. It's like the system was designed to tear down family, because they would transfer me so far away from home that my family wouldn't be able to afford to come and visit me. But through GJP, I would get to see them 3 or 4 times a year. So that kept a bond there. And I appreciate GJP for that, and I will for the rest of my life.
So we're talking about facing the many barriers that come with having a criminal history. Barriers to every area of your life: employment, housing, attending college. And it can be very difficult to deal with, to understand why that you did in your past held against you for the rest of your life. One of our clients, Bacaro, came to see us a couple of years ago because he was facing roadblocks due to his criminal history.
It was discouraging, you know, on several occasions, applying for housing. I can't remember exactly where this application was, but they sent me back a list of the disqualifying factors, and it was like, okay, yeah, I gotta do something about this. GJP came in expunging and sealing whatever could be sealed. The level of opportunity has increased, and I know that without the help of GJP, that wouldn't be the case.
So we are trying to move Georgia in line with other states that have recognized how important it is to get people back to work and for people to be able to pursue other opportunities. If we are able to expand expungement in Georgia, it could potentially impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of Georgians who want to be able to take care of their families because they would be able to move into a higher paying job. Most of the people that come to see us come because they are having difficulty getting a job. One example is our client, Elvina.
My situation was some furniture that I had bought, and I just stopped working. I lost my job, and I wasn't able to make like the last 2 payments. And they wanted to charge me for theft by taking. But I knew that if I searched for employment, if this was on record, that there would be, you know, slim to no chance of me getting the job. When I got involved with Georgia Justice Project, they were able to have the case dismissed. I'm thankful for Georgia Justice Project because without them, I would not have been able to have the confidence in applying for jobs. 2 jobs, actually. I got to choose which job I wanted to take, and I currently work for them now.
Breaking through these barriers has not been simple, but it's worth the effort. We've been able to connect 19 in Georgia, 4.3 million Georgians with a criminal record. This isn't just a select few. This will affect all of us. So when we do our work, we don't just see legal cases. We see people who are looking for a second chance.
With GJP, there's no doubt in my mind that I was able to get a second chance.
With Georgia Justice Project, I got a second chance.
And I want to say this, with GJP, I got a second chance.
So what you saw there was an overview of our work, and I was glad that we got Willie and Vaccaro and others to speak in there. Vaccaro calls me every couple months to check in, and he's become a good friend of the organization and me. And so we want to go on, obviously, but maybe start by how GJP came into being, the origin story. And I'm hoping that that origin story will tell us something about how GJP and Doug in particular decided that a more spiritual approach, a different approach, was necessary when addressing legal issues and when addressing the suffering of people who need legal and social service support. My understanding, the little I know, is that GJP was started by a guy named John Pickens, and he left a big law firm and a lucrative job to start this work, and Doug soon joined, and the rest is history. But Doug, why don't you take it from there and tell a little bit about how GJP came to be, how you came to this work, and how you and John decided that you were going to do work in such a different way with clients and communities.
Well, I'll just give a few sort of points of outline. I mean, obviously I worked really closely with John for a number of years, and he, so I think John really came to this work first out of his faith as a Christian and showing up and helping at churches and shelters in the early 80s. He was a corporate litigator with the biggest law firm in town, and really got challenged to sort of ask the question of how is his law practice connected to his faith in a way, even though he was doing work, you know, they were separate in many ways. You know, he'd do religious stuff or service stuff, and then he'd do legal stuff. So he started just showing up, and when people found out in, you know, soup kitchens and shelters, when people found out he was a lawyer, they started asking him to go to court for him. And he started doing that. And one of the things he saw, the biggest thing he saw when he would do a civil case, he thought, well, two things. There's at least a few groups out there that help. And then when it came to criminal, there was just the public defender. So there weren't that many resources available. And also when it came to criminal, there was just so much more at stake and so much more, you know, dire issues going on. So his vision in starting this work was first to address that gap he saw, to provide some form of relief in the criminal setting, but also he just saw people, even when he would represent people initially, he saw sort of a revolving door. The folks would, you know, get out, come back and into the system. And recidivism is always a big deal in the criminal justice system. So his thought was to do a couple of things: to bring justice for folks, to really have somebody fight for them and have a sense of somebody fighting for them, but to really try to stem that tide of the revolving door syndrome, if you will. And so, and he took this on in a way also to sort of, you know, really framed around relationships, of not just being a lawyer for somebody, but really, you know, staying with them long term. The Willie, who actually one of the first cases I worked on almost over 30 years ago, I was still a volunteer at the time. You know, he's a good example of one of the ways John saw that is if we lost the case and somebody went to prison, and Willie did, is we'd stay with them. So I would visit Willie in prison. Many of our staff would visit Willie in prison. And obviously you heard Willie talk about his our relationship with his family. So John's notion first was a relationship approach that didn't end when the case was over. But you can't, you know, do that, I think he saw, unless you're going to be a vigorous advocate, unless you're going to be somebody who believes in your client and fights for them and earns their trust and respect. So, so those are the two sort of cornerstones of how the work got started, if you will. And well, let me stop there for a moment, Ross. Toss it back to you. I don't want to ramble on. I'll let you. What am I missing, or what do you want to add, or what do you think is important to hear?
No, that's good. I mean, I'm curious, maybe just tell a little bit about how you got involved in the work, and then how you decided to stay for what would become 40 4 years, right?
A long time. Yeah, that's, I don't know. I'm losing track. Well, and for me, I'll say, you know, I met John, I was on my way to law school. I came to Atlanta. I took a few years off from undergrad. I came to Atlanta to work with an urban ministry for the summer, really just helping out with a bunch of college kids who were, when all the folks in this ministry were sort of going to the same church, and when folks heard I was going to law school and I was here helping with this urban plunge back in the mid 80s, they pointed to this tall guy in the corner with a guitar and said, "Have you met him?" And I said, "No, who is he?" And he's, you know, John had just started the organization. And so I got involved, started volunteering back then. It took him a while to let me volunteer, but that's another story I'll say. But for me, the motivation really comes out of two places. I mean, my faith, you know, originally my faith as a Christian and in a sense of service and calling, but it also comes out of a place of real suffering. I mean, I grew up very poor, you know, single parent father who was an addict. And so in many ways, growing up that way, I thought my goal was to, you know, leave, you know, like many lawyers, like many people who have, you know, many, not just lawyers, but people who are trying to change their circumstance, and law does present that opportunity for many of us. My goal was really more running away, if you will, and not sort of turning back into the very thing that I was trying to change. So I really felt for me that it was a sense of calling about sort of turning back towards the space and the place and the people that represented my past, the thing I was trying to not be. So for me, those two big pieces were always part of it, sort of a sense of how I understand suffering in my own life and in the world, how I understand my relationship to a sense of purpose through my faith. And I, you know, have to add here too that I mean, you know, we're here doing this work, and you know, race is a constant issue in the criminal justice system, and it always has been. And my grounding in that, I would say, is, you know, very aware of my sense of, you know, most of our clients are African American. I am not African American. But I think my two things I think really ground me in this, my own sense of sort of suffering and how I connect that in the sense of calling. And also one thing that's been a very grounding thing for over 30 some years is my wife is a woman of color, and we've been together since college, since the early 80s, and our two boys. So I think when I think about my connection, if you will, to this, to the criminal justice or the really just racism really in this country. And there's no better place to see racism in this country than the criminal justice system. And I've always had a sense of calling about trying to do something about racism. Started groups on, even as a college student, around racial issues. But I think there's no better place to sort of take on that work than, unfortunately, in the criminal justice system. And I think those are just some things I'm very aware of. I'm just very aware of race. I'm very, through my own family, I'm very aware of race in this work, and sort of how I show up in that, and my own sort of history. So I don't know if that's, Ross, let me stop there. I don't want to ramble. I'm going to let you kind of keep moving the ball around.
Well, I think that's a good transition, because next I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of the problems with the legal system and the problems with our political system. And we got to start sort of with the practical problems before you can go deeper and ask what's sort of spiritually missing or wrong with the system. First, you have to have some understanding of what's practically wrong with the system. And I'm going to share my slideshow, I suppose. Erica, I said I'd have you share it, but I'm just going to go share mine because I think that's maybe easiest. Maybe not, who knows? So everybody see that? Okay. Cool. So the practical problems with our legal system, these are problems that many of you know very well. Many of you work with these every day. Many of you have experienced this as a victim or survivor of this, and other people are in solidarity with people dealing with this. But maybe the most salient problem in our legal political system in our society is racism. And like Doug says, that comes out so clearly, maybe more clearly than in any other venue, in the criminal legal system, where 1 in 3 Black men have a likelihood of being incarcerated, and 1 in 6 Latino men have a likelihood of being incarcerated. The demographic that has the largest increase of incarceration rate is Black women in this country, in the United States. And as you can see here, the incarceration rates in the United States are the highest in the world, and Georgia even higher than the national average, than the US average. So I like to impress this upon people when I give presentations, that the state of Georgia has the highest incarceration rate, and later we'll talk about correctional control more broadly, but the highest incarceration rate and the highest rate of correctional control of any state or country in the world. So there's a deep practical problem with that, the fact that we have put so many human beings in cages. There's a real practical problem and moral problem with the fact that those people who we put in cages are predominantly people of color. And there's a problem with the fact that our legal system, which is designed to solve problems, which is designed to resolve conflict, instead has reproduced cultural problems and divides like racism and racial discrimination, but also more direct or individualistic problems like recidivism, like recreating cycles of unemployment, of poverty, of addiction, of mental health issues. Here you see this correctional control graph, which shows that Georgia has this highest rate of correctional control. And we talk about correctional control, that's a goal, that's one of the main goals of GJP, to reduce the number of people under correctional control. Recognizing that it's not just people in cages, although that is so obviously problematic and wrong. But it's also the fact that so many people, even once they leave jail or prison, are under the control and constant supervision of the state. And another thing that I tell in presentations is that, we talk about the number of people under correctional control in Georgia. It's about 515,000 people. That's about the same number of people in Georgia who were in slavery in 1860. It's about 490,000, 95,000. The number of people who have a criminal record, maybe you're not supervised and under the direct control of a probation officer of the state, but you still have this record attached to you, this symbol which says that you're not an equal citizen, that you don't have and shouldn't have equal opportunities at jobs, at housing, at voting in some cases. But in Georgia, it's 40% of the population has a criminal record, has this sort of mark of subservience, this barrier to freedom, to power, to agency. And coincidentally or not, 40% of the population of Georgia in 1855 was under slavery. So the criminal legal system we see reproduces the same forms of social control, of racism, of colonialism that we've seen in much earlier stages of our country and our world. And these things have real effects on people, real effects on people's ability to get employment, real effects on people's ability to get housing, real effects on people's ability to be with their children and care for their families, real effects on the strength of communities. But I want to ask, and I'm going to ask mainly right now, DJ and Doug, if you want to weigh in. This is the practical problem with our legal system. This is how the legal system fails to solve problems and in many ways recreates problems. Well, why is that? What is the sort of deeper issue here that causes the legal system to fail, or the legal system to work in the opposite way that we'd like to work for evil? Is there a spiritual component here? Is there a spiritual problem that we need to unveil, identify, and discuss, that we're not discussing currently in our society about the legal system and our political system? One that's goes deeper than simply material rights and wrongs, benefits, and detriments of our system. So Doug and DJ, I'd like you to weigh in there and allow everybody to stop hearing my voice.
Well, I think Ross, to kind of start, I think you already mentioned it, I asked the question, we hear many times the legal system is broken, the criminal justice system is broken. And I would ask, is it, or is it doing what it was intended to do? When I first started studying history and politics, the definition that stuck with me the most was Harold Laswell's definition of power. He defines power as who gets what, when, and how. Who gets what, when, and how. And who is the who? Who are the people who are making the laws? Who are the people who are executing the laws? Who are the people who are carrying out these laws? And oftentimes it's a superseded group of people, white people. And there's a benefit there. And so oftentimes I look at it as a Black person, as a Black man, as someone who has relatives who have been embedded and tied up in the system for their entire lives, and not only themselves, but their families, their children, their mothers, their parents. It has overwhelmingly seemed heartbreaking. And one of those places where when people are heartbroken that they turn to is their faith. It's always been that way. When I was talking to people who were in prison, they would also talk about what's getting them through is their faith. And it's even when they got out, they still had to turn to their faith because they had to make sense of what was happening to them. And their families had to make sense of what was happening to them. And so I think that there is a spiritual component. We see it. When you go to a prison, it's a dark place. And I don't just mean like dark as in the vibe, but the color. Prisons are bleak places. They're places, they're not full of light, they're not full of art. They're not full of all the things that me and you see on an everyday basis. And that's the spiritual component. Our mood literally changes when we have sunlight. That's a physiological response. And so we think of the ways that the criminal justice system actually tries to decompress the spirit, decompress the mind. That's spiritual. That's an attack. And so I would challenge us to think of the ways and to really examine the ways in which our society aims to rehabilitate people or reform people, and the ways in which we do that, it actually causes more harm to individuals. And I would even invoke, in African American culture, there's a need to gather and to celebrate and to commune with each other that we were often denied historically. And so prison is another way of destabilizing that type of culture and community. And I would argue that these are ways in which prison, and I'm talking about the physical prison, and the culture that targets, society. And on the reentry point, Ross, you laid out the collateral consequences. And again, these are people, I've talked to people, and one of the biggest things they say, is when I get out, I can't share this part of my life with other people out of fear of being judged. I can't even share it at my church because I don't want to be judged at my church. And so even, there's still so much restraint and movement once people are released from prison. And there's you labeled it. A lot of people think of the criminal record like a scarlet letter. So there again, you're seeing this religious symbolism that applies, in which when people are outside, they still are being judged for something that happened 20, 30, 10 years ago. And there's no true spirit of redemption and forgiveness. And I think that's one of the things we're missing from our criminal justice system and politics, is that sense of forgiveness and redemption. Is how can I pull myself up, but how can you all help me pull myself up?
I love it. Thank you, DJ. I think that's powerful and true. Doug, we talked a little bit about this earlier in the kitchen. So, and one response to that sort of that legal aid and public defenders and well-meaning reformers have tried to kind of address those issues of racism, segregation, community deprivation, the ways in which people are physically, socially, and spiritually harmed. One ways that lawyers have tried to solve that is by developing a human rights or constitutional rights framework, individual rights framework, and B, by creating big systems to help people and to help people sort of fall off the total cliff into poverty and instability. And Doug, I know you have some thoughts on that, but ways in which our responses to the problem have been themselves inadequate or even more flame, even more fuel for the problem.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ross, and thanks, DJ. So one of the things I think about, and I think about Peter's writing on this, I think is going to reminds me of this and coincides, is that in the 60s and 70s, we had so many answers, if you will, as a society to try to solve really deep problems. I mean, if you think of legal aid and public defender work really came about in the 60s and the early 70s. I mean, they were really on the 60s. And many of the answers that we had as a society to address really difficult problems was really, I believe, so very one-dimensional. And but it's not just me saying that. I remember when Sergeant Shriver died, a number of years ago. He even talked about how the momentum that they were trying to create wasn't just making sure somebody's base needs were met, or in our case, that somebody had a lawyer. That was only the first step in a larger continuum of what they hoped to do. What they really saw this effort of trying to create, really what John Lewis and the folks in the civil rights movement said was the beloved community. So if we think about it in sort of these stages or this arc, we've only taken the first step in really 40 years or 50 years, coming up on 60 years. I mean, it's a one-dimensional step, and we haven't let those steps of whatever type of service and opportunity that we've created as a society, we haven't let them, I often say, mature to the next level. They're stuck in adolescence, or not, they might even be pre-adolescence. And if you think about just criminal defense work, we are in a sort of a pre-adolescent phase of what it means, and not just criminal defense work, but all of these sort of deliveries of services and opportunities got stuck really about like 1973 or 74. And we thought we were done, but that was just the beginning and not the end. So I think when I think about this, not just for legal services more broadly, not just what we're doing, but I do think there's a need and a hunger to let those beginnings mature to the next level. And I think the next level is a more full embrace of not just the folks you're serving, but of community and who we are, and creating a different level of community. I mean, I think that's what those folks really were trying to do in the first place, as Sergeant Shriver reminded me, and others. But so I think a lot about that when I think that and I think about how criminal defense work or legal work is taught in law schools in America, at least, it's really taught one-dimensional. Like, you just make sure that somebody has a lawyer and you're sort of done. And it's just sort of fighting the state's case, and that's all you do. And so many times, and others have heard me say this in the past, you're even trained not to ask people, about themselves. And you're just, the lawyer's trained to fight the state and stop. a very half-dimensional aspect to engaging people, even legally, and very short-sighted, of course, I believe. But and I understand there's lots of legal and ethical and moral considerations, but that doesn't make it any less, that's complexity, and that's life, that's community, that's relationship. That's what we should move into. So I don't want to ramble on about that, but is that sort of what you're getting to, Ross?
Yeah, that was great. And I think both of what you said gives a complete picture of both how the system has harmed people and communities, and then how our response, or the legal world response, even a well-intentioned response in some cases to make those better, have actually failed to make them better, and in some cases made them worse. GJP is doing things differently. GJP tries to embrace a spiritual dimension of work, a relational dimension, a dimension that looks at the whole person and stands with people as they try to transform their lives and strengthen their communities. And to illustrate that, first, I want to show a video of Rick Anderson speaking, who's one of our very early clients, and someone who then came on to work with GJP, is currently on GJP's board, somebody who's been very active in this community here in Atlanta. But it started out in a place of suffering. So Erica, yeah, if you want to start playing Rick's video.
My name is Rick Anderson. I'm a retiree from St. Joseph Mercy Care after 21 years. When I first met John, Georgia Justice Project helped me by embracing me without judging me, really though. John Pickens was not educated about addiction, about HIV. He was very new in '87, but it didn't bother him. He embraced me, and this light went on in his mind that he's starting this program to represent the homeless, and I would be the perfect match, being that I had lived on the streets and I was a law school graduate, that we could work together, even though he didn't understand what I was going through at that time. So I thought I had reached my bottom then, but it took 2 more years. When I met John again, he resolved my legal issues and gave me a job with Georgia Justice. It's about giving people a second chance, and that's what they're all about. And it's not just the legal part, but they get the social service component. And it really works out. And being part of the Georgia Justice Project means I am affiliated with an organization that's very caring and very supportive, and that's needed. I really enjoy the legislative day we have at the Capitol every year, and how they have advocated for laws to be changed for people who have been incarcerated, people who have made mistakes, people who need a second chance. And I also believe that the people who I've seen go through the program have benefited from their compassion, legal expertise, and the social service component.
So Rick uses words like compassion and love there, and I'm glad he does, because those are the things, the concepts and the values that we're trying to bring into our work with clients, and that Rick's then uses as a staff member here. But he also talked about this holisticness in our work. So in talking about GJP's work, GJP's response, a response that tries to be, and I think is different than most legal practices, and that most reform efforts. We embrace 3 big values. 1, we are holistic. 2, we are systemic. And 3, we are optimistic. I want to go through each of those principles in turn and talk about how those come into the work, how our work is spiritual, and how through those principles, through the application of those principles, the spiritual aspect of our work has an incredible impact that's really necessary, I think, to transformative work. So first, our work is holistic. And Doug talked about this a little bit, but to give some more context, every person who comes into, applies to our services, people come to us, their agency is what begins the process of our legal work. When they come to us, rather than being assigned, they are given both a lawyer and a social worker. Every person is given both a lawyer and a social worker who has a criminal charge. And those attorneys and social workers work with them to address that legal charge, together forming an advocacy package that will bring about a defense in their case. But they also work and talk and get to know people to address and confront their deepest challenges. Those deepest challenges might be challenges of the legal system, a history of incarceration and trauma that comes with being in a really dark place. But they could also be addiction. It could also be mental health issues. It could also be a breakdown of family and community, a feeling of and a being of isolation. So we're not reticent to address those sort of deep fears and those big hopes that a person has. And we commit, social worker, attorney, organization, and client, to working with somebody, standing by somebody as they go through those challenges, and then beyond that, as they hopefully thrive and create. So that's it's a deep form of holisticness or holism. And we have another video by a client named April, who we'd like to share to talk to give a little bit more context and insight into that. Thanks, Erica.
Yes, my name is April Lillian Sentmanat. I am the founder and CEO of Woman to Woman and Associates. The Georgia Justice Project helped me by making me a part of their family. It was great that they were instrumental in me walking out of prison with time served. I had a very severe felony. I was charged with armed robbery, a violent armed robbery that I, did while I was on drugs, and I was alone. I had nobody. So they made me a part of their family, which gave me self-esteem and gave me love. They not only treated me as a client, but they treated me as family. Doug AMMAR was, one of the greatest blessings in my life. He made me a part of the Georgia Justice Project family, but I met his wife and I met his children. Julie Smith, who was like a surrogate mother to me at the time, blessed me with things that I thought I had lost forever. So they helped me by teaching me that it was okay to be a human being again. Being part of the Georgia Justice Project means that I'm never, ever alone. They have been with me every step of my journey. My life's journey has been one that was in the bottom of hell, and now I'm climbing, the stairway to success. And every step, they have held my hand. In my bad times, in my good times, even in my successes now, they donate to my organization. They show up to my events. And so to me, that means that I'm gonna always be a part of their family, and it's very important when you're going through things like we have.
So Doug and DJ, I'd love you to respond, give your thoughts in response to the videos that of Rick's and April sharing their thoughts. And in particular, how do you think that this sort of holistic value and holistic approach, this deeply relational holistic approach, why do you think that's so important and impactful in working with a single client, but also in working to try and transform the system that confronts people? And we'll get to the sort of the systemic value in a minute, but that holistic approach, why is that so important and impactful?
I think it's really important because people, and I'll be honest, people don't talk to lawyers every day. They don't have, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to. And there can be some anxiety there. And if I'm talking to an attorney, if I'm going through something difficult, there can be some anxiety about it. And as somebody who sits at the front desk and answers, and talks to old clients on the phone. I couldn't tell you how many people who just come by and say, yo, I need to talk to Doug. I need to talk to Julie. I need to talk to Rachel, because these people were there for me when I was at my lowest point. And to be able to be seen as a person, sometimes I think that people are intimidated about not being seen by a lawyer, by a police officer, by a judge. It's like, how can you see me as somebody who made mistakes, but also is trying to do better. And one thing I've learned in my time here is just that holistic word that you keep talking about is just it's about seeing people, seeing a whole person. Like, I'm a three-dimensional person. I'm not two-dimensional, I'm three-dimensional. Is that I have needs, I have problems, but I also have wins. And it takes all of that working together. So looking at the legal side, looking at what my needs are, and then tapping me on the back when I win, letting me know, you see me, I did something good and you appreciate that. Because we do a really bad job in society of congratulating and loving on people and letting people get their flowers. And I think that that's what family does. I really like that April used that word family over and over again. She said, they're my family, they're my family. And if you know anything about family, family can be tough on you, but family also has to love you and celebrate you, and is there for you when you're winning. And I think I think we do a really good job of that, of showing up for people, not only when they're down, but also when they're up. And that's what family does. And that's what family has to do. And we have to be able to imagine that for the rest of the world, that we're not just here to save the day. We're here when you save yourself. We're here when you pick yourself up. We're here when you celebrate, and we want to celebrate with you. So I think that that's how we imagine and push for the world we want to live in and coexist with each other, and not just be so standoffish or two-dimensional with each other.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, DJ, and I agree.
I was like, Doug, you're not gonna say nothing.
Yeah, I guess Doug's not gonna say anything, but DJ, I think what you said captures really the heart of it. Because we've worked with those clients and we've been in relationship with people, really beside people, the whole person, as they journey through maybe a criminal charge, through a conviction and sentence, whether jail or prison or probation, and then through the reentry stage, through their attempt to recover and reintegrate, to become part of a community again. We've recognized through that individual work that this is really a system. This is really a system at work, a system that people are fighting against, that they're being harmed by, and ultimately a systemic approach and a systemic strategy, I don't know, a systemic value is necessary to make things different. So we think about systemic work in terms of policy. Yes, GJP does a lot of policy work, and Doug has said that we've worked to change 21 laws in Georgia, but also by building community, by building the family with clients, between clients and their families. We have regular events every year, at least 2, a back to school event and a holiday event, where all our clients and their families are invited to eat together, to be with each other. And building that community is a way to activate people in the advocacy effort, in the effort for justice and change and transformation, creation, but also to build a larger community, a beloved community, and to build a social movement. We have a video, it's a little bit longer, about 4 minutes, from a client named Bonner Ziegler. And the reason we're showing Bonner's video now is because he went through our criminal defense work, he was a client, but then he has also been somebody who's been incredibly involved in our community work. He's a DJ now, which I don't know if he talks about in this video, but he DJs all our events. And he's somebody who he's faced other problems when he's come out, and we've represented him on different things. I represented him on child support matter, but he is an incredible father, an incredible person and friend, and a great contributor to the beloved community that GJP is helping to foster and be a part of. So let's play Bonner's video.
How I came to know GJP was my mom. I got into some trouble as a teenager. So my mom heard a radio program. It was on a Christian radio station. So she heard Doug on the Christian radio station about how they would represent just different people if they didn't have the money, you know. And Doug came and sat with me, and he took time with me. He got to know me, got to know my mom. I did get a conviction, and I did go to prison for 5 years. So, but they continued to stay in contact with me, continued to visit me, continued whatever I needed, or even as far as, say, if my mom needed something at the house, which I was in prison. You know, I was a teenager, but she may have needed different resources. So they did reach out to her also, not just me. I did 5 years. So when I was released, they made sure I had a job. So I didn't, you know, because I never really had a steady job. I went at a young age, from 16 to 21. So when I got out, I was 21, and they made sure I had a job, stable job. And that was a start of me working, and it gave me a sense of stability. And where I didn't have to, where I see other folks may get out and they don't have that. So that's why I think a lot of recidivism comes in, because a lot of people don't have the resources when they do get out of prison or whatnot to get back into society. And so in that way, GJP has helped me a lot. I'm 43 now. I have kids, and you know, but they've been a part of my kids. I have a son, second year at Morehouse. I have my second oldest, junior, my third oldest, junior also. And I have a 8th grader. And so they've been a part of my kids' life also. Where as far as Christmas gift cards, whatever they could do to help. You know, I don't really ask for anything, but they're always willing to help with whatever. You know, they offer. I feel like I have friends with them, or if anything happens with me, no matter how big, how small, I can always call, talk to someone. What if I need counseling? One of my kids need counseling? Because a lot of times when you don't feel like nobody will help you, or you don't know the resources out here, you feel lost. So, you know, and that's they've been a big part of my life where I wouldn't have to feel lost. Having that, knowing that I would have a job, getting out, just think, you've been in prison. I went to prison at 16. I'm getting out at 21. And somebody comes to see me a week before I get out and say, we got a job waiting on you. Thank God for my mom, where she set out to meet Georgia Justice, you know, but if it was up to, I didn't know what to do. If I didn't have a family or anything, I would have been lost in the system. And even I was convicted in '93, which was 27 years ago again. Yeah, 27 years ago. Still to this day, I can't even drive for Uber. There's certain jobs I can't get because that's the first thing that pops up on my record is my old, you know, and I'm so far past that now. And it's frustrating, it's hard, but I deal with it. You know, if it wasn't for GJP, my child probably wouldn't be in his second year at Morehouse. I'm proud to say that, you know. Or my second oldest, he probably wouldn't be focused on the Air Force. You understand? I never had to go to court for them, you know, and it feels good. It feels good.
So when we talk about systemic, we're talking about policy change, but policy change comes about when communities are able to see change, and communities are able to get some power that they didn't have before, that was deprived of them. Bonner is somebody who's gone through our system and become an important part of our community, and because of that, he's helped grow our community and help contribute to the systemic change that GAP works on. But that idea of systemic work, that value, Doug or DJ, do you have any thoughts on that? Do you want to speak to that at all, or anything that Bonner said?
Well, one thing I was going to add real quick is that filming of Bonner actually took place at our day at the Capitol. We have a couple days at the Capitol we do, and he was actually there lobbying for bills. It's probably a couple of years ago now. So the irony, the consistency of what, his clip is that he was down there pushing for change in the Capitol when we asked him to, had a film crew there, a group to film him and ask him some questions. So. To Ross's point, to me, these ideas of holistic, systemic, and eventually optimistic all start to become sort of spirals of ever-growing diameters and radiuses. And so the more you involve someone, the more you get to know them and you pull them in, and they're a part of your life and they're part of what we're trying to do. Rick's mentioned this too, and I think Theo's clip might mention it as well, but the power of them not just wherever they are in their life and their family, but then they're trying to change laws for other people in the community. And their agency showing up and their voice showing up in a whole different way than just for their own lives or their own case or their own family, but for folks in community. So it does become an ever widening circle of engagement. So I just want to make that.
The only thing I wanted to mention, and to kind of piggyback on what Doug said, is I thought when he talked about his kids, I could see Bonner's chest pumping up. And I think he understood, in which we all understand, is that when a person is incarcerated or what we say justice impacted, it's not just them, it's also their families. And so I think about what would have happened if he hadn't got a job after, and what would have happened to his kids. And we know the likelihood that once a child has a parent incarcerated, their own chance of incarceration jump, and that increases. And so what happens to communities that are born into families with an incarcerated parent? And so we understand we have a duty not only to him, to Bonner, but to his family and to his community. And I think it's really powerful to mention the way we disrupt systems and disrupt patterns.
Thank you both for that. I think when I think of it, it goes to some of Peter Gable's work and writing, recent writings. If y'all have read some of his recent writings, he's spending a lot of time thinking. Peter, you're right there, so if you want to comment, feel free. But Peter spends a lot of time thinking about social movements and how authentic connection, mutual recognition, and power arises from a community that comes together and sees each other and works toward some transformation of systems. So Peter, I don't know if you want to add anything about that, how a small community and individual relationships can grow into a larger social movement. And then we'll move on to our next and last session before the Q&A.
Well, just the accomplishments that you guys have made in expungement of records and all of the practical, very practical side of your work and policy, I suspect, I'm not in Atlanta, has resulted partly from this tornado of hope and possibility that you've created out of that one building there, that, people respond to the idealism, the sense of love and belonging, and they begin to open their minds and hearts in response to that. So that's one reason I'm so encouraging. I'm so glad you're doing this presentation today, and encouraging of expanding what you guys are doing is first getting the ethos out so that people understand the beloved community dimension of the work, and then expanding it to others so that this creates a dawning awareness in the whole legal culture that what everybody actually wants to do in law, what they really aspire to in creating a just world, this is the way it can be done so that it can catch on as a ricochet. That's a movement within law that seems to be ready to happen. So it's that ricochet of an opening up of the heart, a realization that this service, but also this type of human connection is what we are all longing for. So yeah, that's the idea.
Oh, thanks,
We
Peter.
know it's true. We all know it's true. We're
Yeah.
just blocked from it by our own pain, our own withdrawal, our own fear that it can't happen or that the other won't permit it to happen. So that's what I would say about it. What you
Thank
guys
you.
do.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's great. Lastly, this last value of optimism, which is a word that's sometimes used in a blithe way. A glass half full type optimism, a be happy type, just don't think of the bad things optimism, even a capitalistic optimism. It's just, we're going to have a bear market, bull market. What's the good one? Bull market, right? We're just going to have a bull market, be optimistic. But there's a lot more that we think about when we think of optimism, and it's a really important value that GJP holds. And really, Doug, I'd like you to talk about this, our belief in people and the value and strength of their spirit, our move to create rather than simply critique. And before maybe you start, we have Theo Barnes who maybe can speak a little bit to the optimistic nature of our work. So Erica, this is our last video. Theo.
I met Georgia Justice in 1999. I was at another facility, a treatment facility for my addictions at that time. My first initial interview with the social worker by the name of Julie Smith. It was strange, but we got through it together, and she won my trust over, and I think I won her trust over as far as my sincerity by having my issues, taken care of and changing my behaviors at that time to live a new life. What I do now, I'm a operations supervisor for a transportation management company here in Atlanta, Georgia that services the AMMAR services at Emory University. I'm also the behind-the-wheel instructor and classroom instructor over there now at this time, so I basically work in transportation. My life has changed. I began to work in transportation, and I had a chance to work with Georgia Justice as an operation manager for a while. I sat on the clients at large board, and now I sit on the client advisory board now for Georgia Justice. It's helped me to understand I can have a change in my life, giving me a new outlook on life, as well as having a chance to know that I am somebody. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a drug addict. I can begin to change those behaviors and begin to work in a new avenue in my life and begin to reclaim some of the things that I lost in my addiction and in my behaviors at that time. I was in a treatment program, basically, and I decided I didn't like this lifestyle anymore, and I wanted to change. And they gave me some ideas, some patterns, some work, some talk, and some inspirations where I can begin to change my patterns and behaviors and begin to live a different type of a life. My experience with Georgia Justice staff was like, oh wow, fabulous. I put it in that word. It was very inspirational. They were very kind. They were loving. They were caring. They are family to me. And anytime they call, no matter what the situation is, I'm there to help because they help me. Right now, as they said, if it wasn't for Georgia Justice, I wouldn't be in school at this time. If it wasn't for Georgia Justice Project, I wouldn't be an operations supervisor. If they didn't give me ideas to say that, hey, you can do this, you can be different, you don't have to live this life. They also inspire me to go out to help others because they are a big part of our community. Hope is one of the things I believe that the staff members bring to clients that come into the programs. Justice, because we need justice. Sometimes some of our clients have been dealt with injustly, and they come to correct the wrong. And they work hard, whether win, lose, or draw, they're there for their clients. You know, and I've seen that with other clients whose situation might be a little different from mine. They stick with them to the end, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's the commitment that the Georgia Justice Project has for their clients.
You want me to jump in, Ross?
Yeah, go for it, Doug.
Okay. Well, that's wow. Okay. So this last piece on optimism, it's a really important thing for me. Let me say these three words really came about. We had somebody help us think about what's core to our work, and this group, or a consultant, actually interviewed a bunch of folk. I mean, clients and staff and volunteers and board and even donors, and they came back with these three words. So I was real impressed that it was a consistent sort of from all these different perspectives about who we were in these three words. But optimism is the one that jumped out at me and all of us. Like, well, what is that? I mean, what is it? What does that mean? And how are we optimistic? And I think about a couple things when I think about this. One is that I really think that our work is much more about fighting to create something than fighting against something. A lot of people in the justice space, in the criminal justice space particularly, it's all about sort of fighting against something. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't fight against things. There are bad things out there. There's bad laws. But I think the energy we try to bring, and I think this is sort of innate in our existence, not we ever thought about it. It's just sort of we really are about creating something and about trying to see something different. And I believe that's true from the moment we talk to a client, from the work we do at the State House to how we engage community, is that it's not just about fighting something bad. I think the reason we've been able to get so many laws changed in the last 10 or 12 or 15 years, or really less than 15 years, is because we are coming up with solutions. And also we're coming at it. Legislators know that we don't come at this just from a theoretical standpoint. It's from the experience we see in our clients' lives. But also we're coming at it saying, let's create something that addresses the problem we see, not just fighting against something that's bad. I think that's the kind of energy that pulls people in. And I think I want to just focus for a moment about I think a lot about our client selection process. And just to pick up on a few things from earlier, is that from the moment we talk to somebody, and by the way, we haven't really said that, or Ross alluded to this, all of our work, we don't charge our clients anything. We also are not part of the system, right? We don't take a case because a judge told us to be there. We don't take government funds, so we're not obligated to do any particular work. And that means that when we show up, I think it's more authentic, or we have the chance to be more authentic with people. So we actually ask everybody we serve to ask us for help. And I'm doing this a long time. Every now and then a judge will ask us to do something, and I've made the mistake of just saying, okay, judge, we'll work on that case. And the client sees us as an extension of the court versus sort of a community group that is more about connecting with that person. And so I've had, the Chief Justice on the Supreme Court here, just stepped off, but he's a good friend. And in the office, he refers a lot of cases. And even I tell him, give them our number, have them call us. They have to initiate a contact with us. They have to ask us for help, because that's what relationship, you don't form a relationship out of just the state or a higher power saying, this is your lawyer. I'm not saying good things can't happen there, but we're really about sort of forming these relationships that are more organic and more generative. And I think that optimistic side is from the moment we talk to somebody. In our criminal defense work, we actually ask our clients and potential clients, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? That's a big part of what's on our application process, because it's not about us telling them what we think they should do. It's about saying, where do you want to be and how can we help you get there? So we're helping them even think generatively, if you will, optimistically, if you will, from the moment we actually do the application process. So for me, optimism is a big thing. I once had a few law professor folks from California. They were here for something, I don't remember. And they were here for a while. I don't remember exactly, but we went to get a cup of coffee afterwards, and they were hanging around the office. This is obviously pre-COVID. And these were pretty experienced lawyers running clinical programs. And they came and they said to me, right when we came with these words, he said, what's going on in your office? People seem happy in your office. I've never heard so much laughter in a criminal defense sort of a place. People are smiling. They're talking about staff, and talking about clients, they're just talking about the vibe, and I hadn't really thought about it that way. And having these other perspectives come in and say, what are you all doing? What's going on there that people, you shouldn't be having this much fun in a place that's dealing with such heavy issues. You shouldn't be this, positive in a place around so much darkness, as even DJ talked about. But I think that's sort of that's really about who we are in a way that has been lifted up for me in terms of a a conscious reckoning that was probably unconscious for us for a long time, is that we really are about trying to create something that doesn't exist. And that creation, I will say too, that we haven't talked about with regard to systemic, is that, you know, we work across lots of circuits. I really love the fact that we are not, you know, Republican or Democrat. We actually, you know, we're able to move stuff in lots of ways by pulling people together. And I think that's where optimism is important, because we imagine a reality and then pull people into that reality, as opposed to fighting a reality that we're trying to deny or change. And so I think that's really true throughout everything we do, from client work to policy work to community engagement. It's about, you know, seeing a vision for something, you know, articulating that and pulling people into that vision and creating something, as opposed to trying to just destroy or tear something down. I just think there's much more energy in that. And I think it's one of the reasons we've been able to do what we've been able to do for so many years. So Ross, I'll pass it back to you. Is that?
Well, I think that's great, Doug. And DJ, if you want to say anything else about that. All right, then I guess we have 25 minutes, and I'd like to take 20 minutes or so to talk with you all. And I hope you have some questions or thoughts, comments, suggestions, share maybe some stuff from your work that you have found. Have you found ways of creating beloved community in your work? Have you found ways of bringing these principles into your work of holisticness, systemic and a systemic approach and optimism? And there are other ways that you have found that bring in these words and concepts that have been stricken from most of legal culture and the legal system. Concepts like creation and love, community, spirituality, forgiveness, peace. So I'm going to stop talking, and if feel free to just turn on your microphones, when you're ready to ask a question or make a comment, and we'll have a discussion. At the very end, we'll come back in the last couple minutes to say goodbye and give a short conclusion. And Doug and DJ, if you two can be the main, if you two want to respond first to questions, that would be great, and I'll step in if somebody calls me out. So any questions or thoughts?
How about I'll do a question to some of our friends, Peter, Nanette, and Perry, for instance, our PISLAP team. I'm just curious, from your all's perspective, did you all hear anything today that was, I don't know, different or enlightening, or gave another dimension to who we are, what the work is about than you've heard before?
Yes, you did exactly what I hoped you would do today, because you brought out, you're often pretty disciplined at educating people about your legislative struggles, your reduction of recidivism rates, your many virtues, practical virtues. But this was the most eloquent I've heard all of you, including your clients and DJ, and just the most eloquent I've heard you about the spiritual dimension of the work and how absolutely central it is. It's invisible. You can't just measure it on a graph, but it is the essence, I think, of why I make it a point. I want to go to Atlanta whenever I can, just to come in your door and feel the generosity and the sort of spirit of what's next, creativity and hope that you guys do generate. And I think you did articulate this, but it's, like we published one of your cases in The Conscious Lawyer, edited by Elaine Quinn, who's here on the second row. And, I forget the guy's name, the gentleman's name, who we wrote about, but it's the interweaving. In other words, people come out of their difficult situations that they're in, with their family, with their driver's license being suspended, with their the time they've served and that record, and the difficulty of getting a job that then reinforces all of the same dynamics, as Ross was saying at the beginning. They are trapped in the despiritualized system, the system that is closed down to the heart and to the concern and care for others. And so you guys just open a window to that. Because you welcome them in, you begin to work on the driver's license first, and as Ross put it, you stand with. It's not that you represent the person like some mere client who has a legal problem. You stand with them as you navigate through the pieces that need to be repaired. And this work of repairing is contagious. And so, it's really, you're good at your job. You know the law, the arenas that you have to engage with, whether it's the DMV or the courtroom or the other party, or sometimes, but I just want to say that I feel you did a beautiful job today of showing us how much this dimension of interconnectedness, of the elevation of spirit itself, creates a feeling of hope and possibility, and then moves people want to move forward in their lives. But they have to have somebody who provides this kind of unconditional, loving support and, in a way, joy, which, you're certainly not taught this in law school. Law school is a burned out place. It teaches you how to be a burned out person for the most part. And this is what people need to learn, is how to be like this. It's easy. It's so much part of what people want to be anyway, if only they could escape the spiritual imprisonment they're feeling. So I just thought you did a wonderful job of presenting it today.
Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's something that is so core to GJP's work, but which we're eager to talk about more. So this was a great opportunity for us to talk explicitly about that spiritual dimension of the work. And Carol Maddox, you're online, and she sent me a message. Her internet is unstable, so she didn't want to speak this or try and speak this, but she wrote this question. She says, "I love your holistic response, including spiritually, to your clients. But given the incarceration numbers given earlier by Ross, there's clearly plenty of work in the vineyard. How can faith communities best augment your work with clients to help support our incarcerated brothers and sisters and in their reentry?" Thank you, Carol, so much for that question. I know DJ has some thoughts on that because we've talked about it, and Doug, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that question, Carol. The biggest thing, and I've learned this from working with formerly incarcerated people, is that before a congregation or a faith community can work with this population of people, they need to be ready to work with this population of people. Because what has happened is often, and I've heard this experience, is that faith communities want to do the work, but they haven't interrogated their own biasness about how we feel of, incarceration, and those things in which we've all adapted a mindset of supremacy, of who's right, who's deserving, who's wrong, who needs to be punished. And we need to do a lot of that work internally, personally, organizationally, and then we should always be questioning, we should always be learning. And so there are faith communities that are doing book talks, there are faith communities that are hiring formerly incarcerated people. They are, they call it green reentry. There's a wonderful group in Atlanta called AMMAR. Their whole thing is they provide green reentry. They're working on making sure folks have jobs. And so it's about thinking about where can we get involved into this fight. Some churches are doing bail reform, so they're working explicitly on bail issues. Some are doing like you said, there's so much work to be done. First, you need to find out where can we fall in? What do we have the resources and capacity to do? Because what you don't want to do is take on a project that you can't sustain. Because what happens often in working in, especially in justice reform work, is that it's nice to do at first, but it's time consuming and it's taxing and it can be financially burdening. And so you have to explain why this is important later on. And so the thing is to really to be invested in, to understand that this is a fight that we're going to be fighting for a while. I mean, I'm learning as I learn from other organizers and policy organizers and reentry organizers that how we got here is took the work of people who were doing reentry work in the 70s and in the 60s of how we think about reentry today, how we think about abolition today. And so it takes time, it takes work, and it takes constant learning what worked, learning what didn't work, and also preparing. So we want to be faith community should be a place where people can come and feel safe and secure. And to do that, sometimes you have to do some hard lifting in the beginning, a hard lift and preparing people for saying we're doing something different here. And we want to make sure that we're welcoming, and we want to make sure that we're inviting, and we can be nice to people, you know?
Thanks, DJ. Let me just add real quickly, Carolyn, thanks for all your work and support that you're already doing and the efforts. But what I would to be, and again, Peter knows me well, and I am very, very practical and very concrete too often. But to answer that practically, there's a few ways the faith community can get involved with our work. One is, we visit our clients regularly in prison. We also take our clients' family to visit them in prison. We rely right now on 2 churches to do that. Now we did it, COVID's changed everything. I think that's finally opening back up. But once a month, we have a van and we align our client's family to come here. Client visits in Georgia prisons, family visits in Georgia prisons only happen on Saturday. So it has to be on a Saturday. So that's one way, is to sort of, get involved. A couple volunteers a year could actually, add capacity to our work. But also, again, in the relationship format, I like what we've been doing in that front, because it's a chance for, people of faith, if you will, to show up and engage with the client's family. You spend hours in the car, we provide enough money to buy lunch together and have lunch and come back. And so the idea is forming a relationship that's with the client's family and getting more familiar with the issues. As Ross mentioned, we have these 2 events we do every year. We've even done them virtually, or like what we call the drive-through Santa, I think is what we did, or the drive-through backpack giveaway, as opposed to our big festival. But we've still been doing them, and we've had faith groups be involved with that. And God willing, we'll be back to having those more in person, and faith groups can be involved. And many groups, companies, and churches have been involved in that. And it's also a chance to form relationships. And one other piece I would say is we work with the Temple, a large synagogue here in town. They've been volunteers for a number of years, and particularly around our criminal records and our parole or pardon application process. So they found a way, even for non-lawyers, to show up and help folks. So whether it's direct service, on our legal work, whether it's the prison piece, or whether it's even the community engagement that we do, and not the least of which, and Caroline, I know you know this, but is the policy work. We have these events every year. We're pushing. Folks can show up and help with that. Again, virtually, given COVID, we're back in person when that time comes. So there's a number of ways to be involved, whether it's a one-on-one or collectively.
Shirani, did you want to make a comment or a question?
I'd love to, if I'm permitted to do so, if it's, I'm not breaking any protocol.
No, please, this is your time.
I'm from the other side of the world in Sri Lanka. we have very similar situation. You know, people are labeled as criminals because our whole system is the system of punitive and deterrent sentencing. And I think I really love the way this group has got together, because it's always a small group of concerned people who can change the world. And I really am impressed by the distinctions you have made. First, the law, which comes from the mind. And we think we are, you know, we pompously say we are delivering justice. But we know in our hearts that we are not delivering justice. We're just punishing people and putting them away and leaving behind fragmented lives. But from that law, I mean, through it has evolved now, where people were saying you need the heart to be involved, not just your mind and the legality of the law, but to make the real, the softening of the law comes with the heart, which is what you all are doing, you know, opening yourselves out to new ideas. Your narrative reflects that. And you find that the love that comes, the compassion that comes, like Portia in The Merchant of Venice says, the law is nothing without the love and the compassion. And I'm extremely, I mean, I think I've never heard people in law talking about the spirituality. How does the spirituality come in? It comes in actually through your soul. And how is what you're doing connected to your soul? It is connected because you are talking of something very fundamental in the Bible. If you read Corinthians 3, it is the one, you know, next to so God loved the world and gave his, next to that, to me, this is one of the most important passages, because it says, so Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. This is all about equality, right? And it says, for you were baptized into Christ and clothed yourself with Christ. There is neither Gentile nor Jew, neither slave or free, nor is there male or female. You are all one in Christ. And this is this great message of equality that Jesus's death brings into our world, where you're talking, what is equality? It is what we decree as judges. I've been a prosecutor, I've been a judge through every level, right up to the Supreme Court. And what do we pompously say? All people are equal before the law. Are your people equal before the law? Not in my country. They're not. The money or advantage. So what is equality about? It is what you're doing, giving them dignity, giving them respect, giving them identity, giving them the personhood. You know, we think that money is everything, but if we were disrespected, we'd realize the uselessness of money, because we think we can buy respect. And here you sit down and you see the person as a holistic person. You see the combination of the law, the rigor, the hardness of the law, softened by this compassionate heart and mercy and things like that. And the equality. Equality is what? Addressing the disadvantage. The disadvantage of the Black community, the disadvantage of women, the disadvantage of maybe marginalized persons. And who creates that? We the privileged. We the privileged who sit 3 meals a day and pontificate to everybody, criticize and critique, and you have got together. I don't know what your backgrounds are. To me, you're a wonderful group of people who have got together and you're doing this, and you're talking about this spirituality, which would have been laughed at. But I think COVID-19 has given us this language, because every forum I have been in the last, I do a lot of lecturing around the world, everybody's talking of spirituality. Even the talk shows are talking of spirituality. Psychiatry is talking of the 7th dimension, which is spirituality. And it comes from this respect, this dignity that you are bringing into the personhood, where you are seeing people and you're celebrating the lives of every person, however diverse. And I really congratulate you, and I absolutely wish you all the luck possible in what you're doing.
Please bring it to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka. That's your next job, is to open one of these in Sri Lanka. Shirani, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Well, Shirani, that's beautiful what you said, and wise. And I think I could listen to you for 2 or 3 or 4 hours just speak, because you clearly have a lot of wisdom and insight. So thank you so much for saying and sharing that. Lyle does have one more question, unless somebody wants to comment real quick first to Shirani. Lyle's question which he said I should just read, he's curious about how forgiveness can be healing, but also how a coerced forgiveness can also be re-traumatizing. So what is the experience of dealing with the role of forgiveness? I think you're right, that's such an important concept that, again, not part of our legal lexicon, not part of our legal culture, forgiveness. So what's the role of that?
Well, I guess I'll jump in, Ross, and that I appreciate a lot of the question. So I am very informed by restorative justice and the way I have practiced in this work, and I've done a number of cases with our clients around issues of forgiveness. Let me just say that we actually are actively trying. This is Peter and Nanette and Perry probably don't know this yet, but because it's finally coming out of the water, if you will. We actually are trying to open a restorative justice center, meaning particularly for criminal cases. I mean, there are, so I can talk about that if you want, but if practicing in adult criminal court, there is no restorative justice option, actually, or mechanism or avenue, probably for 1,000 miles or something ridiculous. I mean, there's nothing, there's very little, maybe there's a handful of places in the country where that exists in the adult criminal justice system. And I'm talking about as an avenue for how to solve the case, resolve the case, deal with the case, or just making an option as a path, as part of the case. So my first response would be that there isn't much in terms of the system opportunity for forgiveness and that kind of engagement that you're talking about. I would say I don't think any of that in the way is ever, or appropriately ever, I should say, forced. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think there's any forced forgiveness that can work, and I agree. It can be, I mean, so the beauty of the way restorative justice generally works is you've got to have a willing and engaged, victim, harmed person, as well as a willing and engaged person who did the harm. And again, I believe a system that will allow for that to happen. So here in Georgia, there is not that path to happen. It's been one of my long, like 30 plus years that would happen here in the court system. That would be an option, that at least a prosecutor, a cop, a judge, maybe even a probation officer or Department of Corrections, whomever in the system, preferably before someone's convicted, to make a different path, that would say this is an option to create some healing opportunity if folks are willing to do it. And let me just say that I think that, so I would say there's few chances to bump into the tension you're talking about, but the tension you're talking about is real. And I think thoughtful approaches to how to deal with what I would just broadly say as a restorative approach would absolutely take your point into heart and try to avoid that kind of outcome, if that makes sense. But please, others can chime in. I know I put a lot of pieces on the table there. I apologize.
Doug, I actually wanted to mention about forgiveness, and please, I feel like y'all could articulate it better than I could, but I think that is something that's learned. I remember when learning to forgive, that was something that I was always told, but I was never shown how to do. And so I'm wondering, as a society, have we been taught how to forgive? Is that something that's embedded into our society and our culture? When I think about the government, does the government forgive or ask for forgiveness when it makes mistakes? I think we both know the answer to that. And then I'm wondering, on the flip side, if I'm waiting on forgiveness, if I'm born into poverty and I'm not waiting on forgiveness. I'm trying to figure out how to get things done. So I'm wondering is like, who are we learning forgiveness from? Where is that modeled at? Where do we see that demonstrated and not just talked about? As in less in theory and more in practice? It's just a question. But where are those places in which we can look at really concrete examples of forgiveness and are able to actually do it and practice it and live it out as we live in community with each other? I think it takes practice and it takes effort and it takes energy and sometimes getting it wrong. But I think that is definitely something that we should look to create models for.
I agree with that, DJ. And I forgiveness is hard to do. And I also have learned how to, have had to learn and learning how to do it. It's not something that comes naturally, unfortunately. And it's not something that our society pushes or encourages. We have come to 2 hours, so I want to end it. And today we've obviously been speaking about GJP and our effort, Georgia Justice Project's effort to build beloved community, to create bonds with clients where bonds and their families where bonds before have been broken, to create human recognition, dignity where people have been in the criminal legal system stripped of that dignity, of that agency, of that power, of their essential human identity, and to create community, to create a new system of justice that's different than the one that's healing, that's transformative, that's not simply an effort to give one party a win, to give one party the sense of vengeance, but to give healing. And that is really what the Project for Integrating Spirituality, Law, and Politics is also doing, PISLAP. It's trying to build and create beloved community and new forms of justice, a new legal culture. It's so different than some of the left communities I've been a part of, even filled with great advocates and filled with champions for justice, but communities that are often also filled with anger and filled with hurt. And GJP, and I think PISLAP more broadly, is trying to create something different, to say, yeah, we want progress and we want transformation. We want to tear down systems, but we also want to create new ones. And we want those systems to be based in love. So Nanette, thank you so much for hosting us. PISLAP, thanks for hosting us and having us here. Nanette wants to say a few words to end it. So I'll just say thank you all for being with us. And please reach out to us. I'm Ross at gjp.org. Doug's at doug@gjp.org. And DJ, are you at dj@gjp.org? Okay, pretty simple. Email us. We'd love to talk more with y'all. Much love. Thank you.
Ross and DJ and Doug, just deep thanks and appreciation to all of you, and Erica, thank you as well. This was a really just an absolutely wonderful discussion, and just for me, who has seen the evolution of GJP over the years. PISLAP actually visited GJP and had a conference gathering there quite a few years ago. It then held that vibe of beloved community when you walk into the kitchen and you walk into the Ebenezer Baptist Church right nearby, and it's clearly developed more and more in that direction. Really appreciated the reflection and the dialogue between the three of you. It was extremely rich and very inspiring. So much thanks, and so good to be with you all today. And just as a quick remark before everyone goes, we do have another session tomorrow morning, same time or afternoon or evening, or depending on your time zone, Spirituality in the Law with Dr. Param from India, and Unitive Justice with Sylvia Clute, which will pick up on some of the themes that the GJP has been working with, in particular around forgiveness and restoration and beloved community as well. So thanks again, everyone, and see you tomorrow.